here. We are now recording.
All right. Well, I will call our meeting to order. And are there any changes or additions to the agenda?
I don't have any.
Okay, that's good because this was going to be a relatively short, straightforward meeting, although with a lot of discussion, I hope. Public comments on items not related to the agenda? Hearing none, seeing none.
Actually, Wendy just joined, so Wendy is our minute taker. So.
Hi, Wendy.
Yeah, we called the order at 6:31, Wendy.
The official agenda, the reason that we are meeting this evening is to discuss the strategic plan and to see how we can look at the strategic plan in terms of building our budget, and or does our budget as it kind of stands today, how is it supporting our strategic plan so that when we go to our communities, people aren't saying, well, look at all of that money that's being spent for the SU, and they start complaining. We will say, this is where it supports the strategic plan that was determined through a whole year of community discussion and dialogue, if that makes sense. Is that okay? And I think that would be such an exciting thing to say to our community instead of, well, we're raising the budget is going up because there was a 80% increase in health benefits, just joking, and an overall 2% increase in something else. Wouldn't it be good to say because let me see, looking at the assessment system for student success or the collaborative practices for culture, something along those lines. So I will let people start the discussion. David, if you'd like to start.
I've got my mic off. That's part of the problem. Did the strategic plan get sent out again?
Yep.
I think, Lori, I was just looking. I thought I saw it, and I think that, yeah, okay, that's good. So sorry, I got distracted because I was looking for it. So could you just repeat that, Amy? I'm sorry. What?
That's a good question. Can I repeat that?
Yeah. Yeah. Better yet, would you repeat that?
So I would imagine, I can't speak for everyone on the board or our administrators, but I think it would be wonderful if we can go to our communities talking about our budget, that instead of our residents saying, why is the SU budget so huge, that we have actual reasons for that, where we're supporting for, let's say, for collaborative practices for school culture or student voice and choice, that sort of thing, instead of saying, well, the reason that the budget is up is because health benefits went up an enormous, frightening amount, or, well, we're giving, for the the recently negotiated contract, there's however percent increase in salaries. But to have actual support to a strategic plan that was part of a community discussion and dialogue that's been going on for almost a year.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be good?
That would be wonderful. Absolutely. I noticed too that Elizabeth found our hand raising. Google Hangouts now has a hand raising function, and Elizabeth found it, and you can see that little hand in. I don't know if you can see everybody, Amy, but
Yes.
Elizabeth has her hand up.
Yes, she does. Yes, Elizabeth.
David, you've heard this a couple of times, and I think we've been talking about it for at least a month because it came up during the executive committee discussion of the strategic plan. And I think Nikki Buck was the person who suggested that to be able to tie it to the budget, that maybe it would be a good idea for you guys to come up with a couple of items that could be tied to the budget so that we can have a more robust discussion about it. Because I think part of the thing that we're feeling, or I'm feeling at the moment, is that it's executed by you, it's approved by us, but executed by you, and there's a gap there. So the part that we have actual input into is actually the budgeting part and the staffing part. Well, not really the staffing part, really the budgeting part.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And do you know how to turn your little hand off?
Yes.
Just click it on again. Good. See, Elizabeth is role modeling the new Hangout. We've got several things. We can go into breakout groups now in case you wanted to spend some time in breakout groups. But Google Hangouts is trying to keep up with Zoom, and they're a lot less expensive than Zoom. So let's hope they continue that feat. But to your point, Elizabeth, and to your point, Amy, and certainly the administrators, and I really thank them for this. They're all, at least most of them, are online tonight because this plan certainly means a lot to them as well, because it will guide us in the future, both around budgeting and staffing and staff development and all of those initiatives that will continue to grow out of this plan. But to Elizabeth's point, the only thing I would do with that is kind of reverse that order a little bit, in the sense that, and I wouldn't say, I know you pointed at me, but I execute. I think you meant the administrative team really, and the staff execute, and you approve. Because believe me, one thing I've learned is that, without a good team around me, and that's everybody, the team that's on the line now, and also it's just not going to get done. But I very much feel confident in the team that we've got. So I think really we want to make sure the administrative team wants to make sure that we don't put the cart before the horse. Each board now has looked at this independently. You've had a chance certainly to look at the goals and the objectives that are in that far left-hand corner. You can also certainly embrace as much of the edu-speak that's in some of those other columns if you want to. But really, I think part of what we're looking for after any questions or suggestions is the board's support for this, because we feel both in terms of the budget piece of this and in terms of the other pieces of the rollout, I think the adoption has to come before the execution. A lot of time, certainly went into this, and a lot of voices around those tables, and I think it does reflect the mindset and philosophy of many of our board members and many of our administrators, and certainly several of the community members who attended those meetings and were faithful to those meetings. But it is a shift in thinking, and I think that that's why it's going to be important, I think, for all of us to make sure you've got the last of the questions answered about the plan, And then once we are clear that we have a direction, then I think we could spend a few minutes talking about budget implications. We've talked a little bit about it as an administrative team, but not in any significant detail. Elizabeth has her hand up again.
Bill did first.
Oh, Bill did. There you go.
Yes, I need Elizabeth. David, I agreed with the fact that, answering questions and passing the strategic plan. But at the same time, I think it's really important for us to spend a significant amount of time laying out how to make this happen budget-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So, I propose going forward and answering any questions, and then, if we could get that passed, then we can get into the real meat of the issue of how are we going to make this actually happen.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Bill. Elizabeth.
I could swear Bill was just about to do it, but I move that this board pass the strategic plan.
Is there a second?
Could I second it?
A lot of seconds.
Okay.
Choose
Mark
one.
Mark Youngling seems like he beat everybody to it. So, and probably I think the correct verbiage might be, Wendy, if you're taking minutes, rather than to pass this, I think to adopt the strategic plan for the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Unit probably is the better wording. So it sounds like Elizabeth made that motion and Mark seconded it. And that's good to get that on the table, because now we can have questions, discussions, additions, deletions. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay, so I see that, Nikki. Elizabeth, did you raise your hand again or not?
She hasn't turned hers off yet.
Okay, so I see that, Nikki, you have your hand raised.
So now that we're on to discussion, I would like to remove the term audit and find somebody with a better term. And I know Wendy put a better term in the Heartland notes, but I don't remember what it was. I think it comes up twice. Oh no, it comes up 6 times.
Yeah, and that was about the well, there were several places where it shows up, but it was certainly in the curriculum audit. What?
In particular, it was the failure audit, because we're dealing with, continuous improvement review, Wendy says. In the failure audit, we're trying to embrace failure, and a failure audit doesn't feel like we're embracing it. So.
Yeah, review is just review in general is probably a better word than audit, and I like the continuous improvement review wherever we can get that in there, because that's consistent with our continuous improvement plans that will have to be building based, because the state requires that those are building based, but they will be based on this strategic plan. So I think that's a great suggestion, Nikki.
Bill?
Yeah, so, some of you have experience with doing plans, as we have some administrators here. I have no real issue with some of the timelines and checkpoints. I think they're fine. I don't think they're particularly realistic, but I think if we get that audit piece out, and just remember, we're going to review. Most true educational change rarely happens under 5 years. That's very difficult to achieve anything in 1, 2, or 3 years. And so, I thank Nikki for bringing up that suggestion, because I had a real problem with that audit, because it was kind of like, okay, let's look at what we failed at. And the reality is there's a lot of stuff in here that we're not going to achieve at the timeline, but it doesn't mean that we can't achieve it.
I agree with that too, Bill. I think that's good. Matter of fact, I think that we've talked as a team about whether or not some of those dates are a little too aggressive, and it might be something we want to, take a closer look after I mean, not tonight necessarily, but after we adopt it. I see Angie doesn't have her little icon hand up, but
I don't have a hand. I mean, I have two of them, but I don't have one for I can't find it.
it's right it's down next to your camera. You don't see it?
Oh,
Look at that, huh? She found it. That's good. Angie, you've learned something
okay,
tonight.
so can I speak? Shall I go ahead?
Yes, you
So
may.
I wanted to talk, so I started thinking about, well, where did that word audit come from? Because you know that it's typically used when you're talking about finances, right? And so there is a term that we've been using in the last year or so, and it's an equity audit. So when I Google equity audit, it talks about looking at processes and systems and trends and culture, practices and policies. And I think the intention of that word failure audit is to make sure that we're looking at those things. So then I go back to the strategic plan, and I want to make sure the language around it is talking about that specifically what we're looking for. So if we were going to change the word audit to review, I would like to make sure that it includes practices, culture, because he talks about the strategy says, supports a system that embraces it, but it's not talking specifically about what are we going to look for failure, the notion of failure, or however we actually word it is investigated in that piece. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Bill, you raised your hand again?
In processing, I think the other issue that I have is if you're going to measure something, you shouldn't use the word failure. I mean, basically, you can call it a success audit and be like, okay, what have we succeeded at? What have we not? That would be my suggestion.
Sorry, Bill. I think you're changing the meaning of it, though, if you do that. Because
okay, well, what's the audit then? Explain that piece.
So the idea is to look at how we embrace failure as a learning opportunity. How failure shows up in our system in terms as a way of making us better. It's also part of the improvement science, so that you try something, it fails. What do you learn from that? Something might succeed from it, something might fail from it, and then what do you learn from that? And then the improvement cycle comes back again. So I think it has to do with that. Now, I'm with you. I don't totally understand what Mike Nicholson was talking about there, but I do think that if we change that word failure to success and look at success instead of failure, that we're changing the whole idea of what it is we're trying to do. And if we're looking at culture and practices and ways of being in our system, how do we embrace failure as an opportunity for growth, I think is what that audit would be looking at. And then let's start thinking about, okay, so what would a failure audit look like? So to me, it's probably coming up with some sort of survey or doing interviews of our community and talking about, and maybe looking for evidence of where we embrace failure as a system and where we really do not allow failure.
I liked your terminology too, Angie, around improvement cycle. I like that improvement cycle because that's we've been through several workshops on that whole idea of improvement cycle.
Elizabeth, you have your hand raised, and then Nikki.
And Mark also.
And Mark after Nikki.
I was just going to type it into the chat box, but also if we are making this a student-centered, student-led system, then this is kind of modeling that for them. So that's all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, modeling how to make use of failure.
So in listening to Angie, I would modify my request to get rid of the term audit, because I think Angie defined it really well. And I will admit that in petitioning to change the word audit, I am channeling Sean, who is not here today. And because he liked words a lot more than I do, and felt that audit was a very negative term. But what I thought was most important is that failure really is an opportunity for growth. And so I would be happy to keep the word failure, audit, in there, as long as there's the sentence that failure is opportunity for growth in that draft strategy. Because I just feel like it's so important to not close down around failure, but to open up around failure and be like, I messed up, but this is how I do it better next time. Because I think that that's exactly what we're looking for. So I just want to make sure that any one of our professionals were to read this, they wouldn't be like, oh, failure audit and close down, because that's really not the intent of the failure audit. The failure audit is to get people to open up and embrace failure as an opportunity for growth.
I want to speak to that, Nikki, because the first thing that someone who doesn't quite understand the thought behind a failure audit thinks that we're just looking at saying like, okay, we're losers, we're going to document how much we're losers, when in fact what we're documenting is how we took that opportunity. Because all too often our kids think that the only way to be successful is to actually just be successful, instead of trying several times and learning from each opportunity. You know, every time that they try, they're learning something more. And then that success, it doesn't happen just the first time. So Mark, go for it.
Actually, Amy, really quickly, running off of what you said, maybe we just change it to conduct a quote, failure to success, end quote, audit. So just put the success right with the failure.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So, okay. Sorry.
Go for it, Mark.
Nikki, I like your last point very much so. I think it would be a mistake to try and remove failure, because I from the lingo, I think it's a really big opportunity right now. I mean, especially through public education in the 70s, failure had one connotation, and to dumb it down for little boys, 99% of the time, it doesn't matter if the quarterback has 5 Super Bowl rings or not. 99% of the time, he fails to throw a touchdown pass. And I think simply having that in their lingo and being able to identify their own goals and see where it didn't work out flawlessly, as soon as they can identify failing to achieve a goal, no matter how small, I think it's beneficial to them instead of making it a reflection on themselves as a whole. So I don't know. I think you hit the nice middle ground with your last comment, Nikki. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, also for bringing that up about the passes and touchdowns and all of that. You know, because on the baseball, you know, there's a really good hitter only hits maybe 3 out of every 10. You know, batting 300.
And that's
good. But also, at least when I was in school, if you didn't do it right the first time, yeah. And again, it was the kind of loser connotation, and that, and a lot of kids, when they don't succeed the first time, they do shut down. And so we're not only going to be helping our kids, but we're going to be helping our community, the adults who support our kids, to understand that just learning every time you go to do something is what we need to be doing.
Learning to learn.
Learning to learn, exactly, yes.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. And I think part of what this refers to, and it's buried in some of the research too, in those other couple of columns, I think, Mike was certainly talking to some of that research that, we've really, our impression of failure now is, or our definition of success and failure has changed in public education now. And I think that's part of that reflection. So it sounds like we're all more or less on the same page.
Mark, did you have more?
He just hasn't put his hand down yet.
No. Okay, I'll put my hand down.
Rebecca's got her hand up though.
Oh, where, I'm trying to see if
I don't know if
can-
you can see
okay.
everybody, but
No, I can't. Okay. Rebecca, go for it.
Amy, really quickly, if you pull up the participants list, it
Yeah,
shows you at the
I was looking at the chat, and now I'm looking at the participants, and there she is.
Okay, I just have a question. Since we have adopted the strategic plan, will this be posted on the school, on the website for parents to be able to look at, or is this something that I just wanted some clarification on that?
yeah, that's a great question, Rebecca. Once it gets adopted, and I'm being optimistic, assuming that we are going to adopt it tonight, then I think it will certainly be posted on the website. But I think what I would like to do in consultation with the administrative team is send out one of my, all-encompassing email blasts that would be reasonably simple, just describing the process and maybe, trying to explain a little bit about the importance of especially the goals and objectives. So we'll figure out a way to get this out to the larger community. You got to remember that there are even some staff members, certainly the ones who worked on this in those committees and in those small committees know about it, but there are some staff members who haven't seen this. I mean, I'm confident they won't be shocked because it reflects a lot of the work we've been doing, but you're absolutely right, Rebecca. We got to get this out to the broader community.
David, when you do that, please do it in consultation with somebody for tone. Thank you.
Yeah. Did you say for town?
For tone.
Oh, for tone. Yeah. Okay.
Language tone.
Yeah.
Angie, your hand is raised.
I think it's in goal number 4. We talked about having identify a role where somebody would be monitoring our work on the strategic plan and our progress on the strategic plan. And I think part of sharing the plan with the outer community is to put it in language that is not so heavily educator speak, because there's a lot of vocabulary and concepts, and like the failure audit, that is very much an education term. And we had a nice, robust conversation about it, but we want to make sure that we're not alienating our community by using language that is challenging. And I also think that just as we speak about it as a system, that language, if we can simplify it down to a few key points, like I'm all about that, so that you can remember it. Because if we cannot, it's dense. It's a dense document. So I would say that one of our first activities would be, as we think about sharing it out, is how can we simplify it and so that it's easier to remember for all of us, really.
Also, and this speaks to a little bit to Amy's point. I also think that I know town meeting is dedicated to budget, but I think to talk a little bit about this strategic plan, just in general, not only how it relates to budget, but I think to outline, some of the goals and objectives and the work that went into this. I think town meeting sometimes is a great forum to be able to, and again, sometimes we get 5 people, sometimes we get 50 people, but I think that would be another way to roll this out.
Rebecca, is your hand raised again? Okay. And yes, Elizabeth, having a portrait of a graduate discussion at our town meetings will be good. Which,
And sorry, Amy, I was just gonna highlight that Mike sent us, it's called the Summary of SP Process and Outcomes, which it kind of is the notes for those of us that are presenting at town meeting.
That's good.
I think we just fly right off of that and we'll be all set. It's a 2-page brief of how we went from Portrait of a Graduate to the strategic plan and a quick summary of the strategic plan.
right, yeah, I was looking at that again earlier today and said, oh, sweet, yeah.
Yeah, and that would be good for the board chair, if the board chair should have that, and the principals. I think you've all got it, but as we put together our town meeting report, the other thing I thought would be nice, and it would also be it would exemplify, and again, I don't want to jam too much into town meeting, but we did have a student voice on the Portrait of a Graduate team, and some of those students are still very much around and very much active. I think it would be nice if one or two of them would, might come to town meeting and say a couple of words about their feelings about the plan and about the process. We can talk about that as we get closer.
Right, and that'll be individual districts anyway, so and we'll be having those conversations at our individual meetings. So, but having common language when we present to our communities will be very good. Let me see, Angie, did you raise your hand again? Okay. Are there other comments? Rebecca?
To your point, David, in terms of town meeting, is it possible to maybe even have someone from the community who participated earlier on in the process to also be able to voice or share what their experience was working with the school personnel around this particular plan? I don't know, Angie may be able to comment because she's been on it from the beginning, but I think that would help also, as opposed to, as Angie mentioned, having just educators and education lingo. Sometimes the community feels better when they hear someone from the community speak to.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I could almost picture in my mind one from each of our 3 districts, one community member who kind of stands out as somebody who represented that community. So I think that's a great idea, Rebecca.
Are there any other comments or questions on the strategic plan overall before I call for a vote? Rebecca, did you raise your hand again?
No.
Okay.
Got to watch that button.
So going forward, what are we saying are the changes? That the only change that we're making is to call it a quote failure to success end quote audit, and that.
Yeah, that seemed to be the major part of this.
Yeah, I'd be willing to accept it after that. Elizabeth's got her hand.
Elizabeth.
Can we have it be failure to opportunity instead of failure to success?
That's even better.
Even better. I love it. Thank you.
Especially for this time of night, Elizabeth. That's well done. It's been a long day in some ways for many of us, but well done.
Angie?
She's trying to turn her volume on. And we lost her. Did we lose her? We lost her. Nicole has her hand up though, or no? Do you have your hand up, Nicole?
Hey.
Nikki? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm talking a lot today. So I guess in formalizing our adoption, maybe we should say that we'll adopt it, but have the administration review the timeline again.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So just add that caveat to our adoption statement.
Yeah.
Angie,
you
you got another comment?
I'm sorry, I hung up instead of unmuting myself. It happens all the time. I don't know. They really need to redesign that bar down there. I was gonna. Now I can't remember what I was gonna say. I'm taking notes on the draft of the strategic plan that we have in the shared drive that was shared with all the board members. So I have that language change.
Okay, great. Rebecca and Nikki.
No, Rebecca's okay. And Nikki's okay. They just haven't turned their little hand off yet. That's all. But they're going to do it. So just to be clear, what's that? Scott has his hand up.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you. So the discussion is really great, and I was kind of bristled a little bit when Bill was talking about change over time. Not that I have any reason to object to what Bill's saying. He's an expert at that. I'm not an educator, but it made me think of our community's perspective here. And so I guess I'm not opposed to the plan or its adoption for sure. This is the conversational part. It seems to me that it's always very important in these things in communicating like the purpose of a vote like this or an adoption of a plan like this. So to me, it's to kind of refer to change taking a long time. The reason it made me bristle is because I was thinking of, for instance, nothing we can't forget at this point. Of course, coronavirus response as being a massive change, and now it's been most of a year, and it's changed the delivery, the product, the process. The evolution or the ability of a public school system to really turn on a dime, to me, it's always amazed me. So I just didn't want for the public to get the idea that being part of a public school district or sending your students to a school district like this is something that perhaps was locking or was such a long, almost I don't know, I'm having a hard time finding the words, but when we have troubles, really everyday problems like coming up with substitute teachers, or the big things that have changed over time since I've been on the board, like the SU transportation system, a food program that's now covers the whole SU, curriculum-wide SU. I mean, SU-wide curriculum. It didn't really take that long, and it's just amazing. I think it's very important that we kind of keep the strategic plan, up there in front of us, and refer to it regularly, but not forget to reward and remind our public and the administrators of our everyday successes. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I mean, it really is an amazing system, public schools. So
yeah,
right. And Scott, I know what you mean by that it's frustrating when you hear, let's say your child is in 5th grade and there's a program or I don't know, philosophy of teaching or something that's going to be implemented over 3 years in the elementary school, and you find out that your child is not going to benefit from that at all. Or like with project, or not project-based, but
Flexible pathways?
yeah, flexible pathways, that that is an entirely new way of looking at how education is delivered and the interaction between students and teachers. And that it's taken a while because it had to be a culture shift, that districts that said, okay, we're doing it tomorrow, kind of hit a brick wall because it needs to be kind of gently implemented. But you're right that we need to celebrate each step of our success, or as we're talking about failure, also that, okay, we tried this in terms of flexible pathways and we discovered that we hit a brick wall. And so we're going to redesign how we go about whatever we're trying to do with flexible pathways. So thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Colleen.
I just wanted to add to what Scott was saying, and that is celebrating our successes. And even though sometimes it feels like in education things do go slowly and it takes a lot of time and things, but we're talking about turning on a dime in a situation of safety. I also wanted to say that the teachers and the students are able to change on a dime for the positive. And some examples of that are our first grade classroom. Observing them recently, they're already talking about perseverance, one of our Portrait of a Graduate competencies. And kids are having a discussion about their training wheels on their bikes and what happens if they don't try, and that they would never learn. So teachers are making these things happen. They're doers. Our high school students are showing empathy by seeing things modeled by their guidance counselors, their teachers, and they're doing empathy events for their custodians, for their classmates in the high school. So the teachers and the students are doers, and they make these positive changes happen when everyone's on board and we're all talking about it. And they came right from the Portrait of the Graduate. So I agree, talk about our successes.
Yeah, I walked into Windsor the other day, and there was just a huge banner strung across the stairway. You could have seen it from Heartland. Actually, it was so big, but it just said, "We want to thank our custodians for all the work that they've put in." It's just, and that was a way to demonstrate empathy. I'm sure it might have been part of a project, might have been something they just thought of, but yeah, these things get lived out every single day, which is why the plan is critical, and those guiding themes are critical, and this plan will be critical. It'll be the centerpiece of the work that we do as we start to change, continue to change our language. And it's a very different world right now, and information at the fingertip, literally.
Jennifer, and then Rebecca.
So I just want to comment a little bit on what implementation science says about the process, because I think it is something that we want to think about. How do we let our community know, as Colleen was saying, some of this has already started. So when we think about change in a system, particularly a school, it starts with the innovators. And I would say those who are on the Portrait of the Graduate were the innovators to a very large extent. And shortly after are the early adopters. And what I think Colleen's talking about are teachers now who are looking at the 5 proficiencies or competencies, and they're finding ways to start embedding it, even though it's not a cohesive plan. Sorry, my dog is getting used to me being home, I guess. And then there's kind of the neutral people who get on board as they're seeing how other people have managed to make it work. And then after that, you tend to have a more cohesive sort of implementation approach so that it's more connected from grade to grade and across the schools. And I think as I when I think about this plan and the timelines, that's what we're looking at for the timelines. Not when do we start talking about a cohesive curriculum around these 5 competencies, but when do we get to a point where we really have some good energy, where we can start saying we have a product that we can share out, that we can talk about and make sense. I just want to put that out there. And another thing is, when we think about this, I think communication is really, really important. And I just want to point out, in the plan, it's 2023 that we're supposed to have a communication specialist. And I just wonder if that's maybe our smartest idea.
Thank you. And thank you for reminding us about the innovators or early adopters, and and just a reminder that there's always going to be 1 or 2 who never quite make it on board. And so everything is also an attempt to embrace everyone, even those who are reluctant to be embraced. Rebecca. Oh, one more thing. I'm sorry, Rebecca. So Jennifer, are you talking about having our communication specialist a little bit earlier in our timeline?
In my mind, I think it's critical to have that person very, very soon. If we're going to be successful in getting this through the community, I think that's really important to think about.
Okay, thank you. And that's part of our budget process. Rebecca, go for it.
Well, I did want to ask, do we celebrate in these times some of the successes that are going on throughout the school district, and where does that show up? How do parents find out about that? How does the community know what types of successes are happening? And that's question number 1. And my second question is, how and where are some of these features being exhibited right now? Colleen, you mentioned specifically some, and I just think that these are just really important pieces that should be going on, but need to go on right now, because it is such challenging times, as David mentioned, that any good news is good news. It's people are looking to be encouraged. People are looking to be lifted up, and to be able to say, okay, anything, these little things are really important right now. They're really valuable. So I just wondered, are they being acknowledged? Are they being identified? And if any place, where is it? And I think that would also be a great piece to speak about when this is rolled out, not only to the community, but also to the teachers who are not aware, who were not part of this process, which I think, which you all know, is going to be a real critical piece.
Yeah, I can answer that, Rebecca, and I'm sure all of the administrators could answer that. And Mark, I see your hand up too, so we'll get to you next. But but the simple answer to that is, I think the administrative team, does get these celebratory comments out. All of them have a weekly newsletter. I've been more recently sending out. We just started with my email blast to the community and parents today. Some celebratory sort of shout outs to folks, including my endearing SU song that was on tape today. But as I'm looking on the call here, there are some of you we've got to figure this out as an administrative team, because it's as much my fault as everybody else. But some of you who are on the board, you don't have kids in school, so you're not getting those publications, and you're not seeing those celebrations, and you're not getting the benefit of a YouTube video with me singing "I Really Love This SU." And so we've got to figure out a way to get we've got to keep, I think for our local boards, we've just got to, almost as part of our regular parent newsletters, and maybe it does happen in some of our districts, but I know I've got to figure out a way to make sure that when I send something out, that you all receive it.
Mark, thank you, David. Mark?
This is just a simple request, and David or anybody else who thinks it's a bad idea, let me know. But as we're in the process of searching for a new principal at Weathersfield, if adopted, I'd like this to get sent right over to the search committee, basically to provide an opportunity for applicants to have an idea where it is the SU they'd be joining is going. Does that make sense as far as other professionals?
Absolutely, Mark. And I think it should be something that's sent, especially to those semifinalists who get interviewed. I think it's something that should get sent to them too, so they know what to expect.
We just want to try and avoid a power struggle for a new applicant, just so they know what we're expecting as an SU.
Yeah, that would not be good. You're right.
So just to kind of bring us back, we do have a motion on the table to adopt the strategic plan. And it just occurred to me that a lot of our conversation in the last 10 minutes, although it's been really, really good, it hasn't been strategic plan directly related. It's been more of how are we going to tell our communities about it. So we need to adopt it first. So were there any other questions or comments about the strategic plan as it currently is presented to us and has been amended by Angie with the changed language?
Actually, now, Amy, when you call for a vote, you could have people raise their hands.
Exactly. That's how we did it at the VSBA meeting. Everyone raised their hand. It was really cool.
Amy, just before you call for the vote, I do have another note that said the added term, the changed term for the audit, but also the adoption would come with consideration that administration would review the timeline. So just adding that piece.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And I'll try to remember all of that. Yes. So all of those in favor of approving the strategic plan as amended for the audit and with a administration looking at the timeline, please raise your hand. And I'm raising my hand, so let me see. I see everyone's hand raised.
That's good news.
Is there, so if everyone can lower your hand. All those opposed to having the strategic plan adopted?
Rebecca just hasn't turned off her hand yet, but we won't put her down as opposed.
No. Wonderful. We have adopted our strategic plan, which is just in and of itself extremely exciting because this started with Portrait of a Graduate. And I think, how many people did we have at that first meeting? Like 70?
Yeah, there were almost 70 people at the first one.
Right. And a lot of times when we have community discussion, a lot of people become discouraged because after that first, second, or third discussion, it doesn't really lead to anything. And now we have a strategic plan which we can tie directly to Portrait of a Graduate, which we are now going to be able to show where our budget is supporting it or where it's tied to our budget. So there's a purpose for all of it. Scott, your hand is raised.
Thank you. Is there in the recording of this that will be available to the public and for eternity, I guess, is it going to have all of our hands there? I mean, that's kind of an important part of the democratic process here, that the public knows how many votes there were.
Yeah, I've got the screen that's recording, I think, is my screen because I own this meeting. Now, that may not be true, but it did. I was able to see every single hand.
Okay.
So I'll watch the recording just to see, but it's a good point, Scott.
Right, and if people would prefer the next, we could do a quick roll call vote.
And works for me. I just thought maybe,
Oh, I know, yeah, but you're right.
Well, won't there be written minutes of the thing, and the vote will be listed in the minutes anyway?
That's correct. And
So-
that'll be on the website.
Yeah.
Yay.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say the vote will read as 10-0, so then they'll know it was everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. But some people would prefer to watch the live, that video as opposed to reading those minutes. So.
Does anybody really watch the video? Oh, God. That's pretty depressing.
I've heard that people do.
Oh, good. Well, I guess that's the way to go.
So let me see. If we want to go back to our conversation on the communication, or is there more that we would like to discuss now?
Yeah, I think, and sorry, I've got to get better at raising my hand, but I just want to kind of say that I think the next step might be to spend a couple of minutes just kind of talking a little bit about the budget implications. We've thought about this a little bit as an administrative team. Needless to say, it's been a little bit hectic, so not as much as I would like to, but I know there are a couple of things. There are some positions in here that don't have to be new hires, but they certainly would be redirection of current positions. One is the data manager, the other is the communications person, and I think there was one other one in there too that's in the plan. But one of the things, and the administrators who are still on the line, want to speak to this. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that in the rollout of this plan, even if you look at goal 1, creating that learning framework and getting that sort of into a readable document form is going to require a lot of effort on the part of somebody to facilitate it, which I'm assuming will be Angie Ledoux along with the administrative team. But also teachers have to have an active voice in developing those frameworks. And especially in conditions like we're in right now, but even just in general, one of the frustrations that Angie has had, and we've all had, is that trying to find concentrated time for teachers to work on this stuff when it's not at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or on a Saturday morning, which isn't going to happen, but really either over school vacations or more preferably over the summer. And a lot of times when you do that, because teachers are only contracted for 184 days, any work that goes on in the summer requires some level of stipend for those people who are involved. So, and sometimes we'll hit up the individual school districts with, we'll bill back for some of that work, but I think it would be nice if we had a chunk of professional development money that was allocated in the SU budget that was devoted to active team support and staff participation in these efforts. So that would be one budget implication. And then I would also, just defer to Jennifer's comment about maybe some sort of, again, I don't think it has to be a position, but maybe some sort of a stipend for somebody who really is good at communicating and whether it's editing my communication for Tone or whether it's just providing the regular updates to the community. Those are the two things that jumped out for me, and I think the administrative team has talked about these pieces in the past. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts or suggestions about budget implications.
Bill, you have your hands waving wildly.
Yes, waving wildly. Well, I'm just waving wildly because, you know, David's stealing my thunder, because that's what I was going to think about. So thank you, David, for introducing me. No, two things. I agree with David. I think the summer piece and the summer funding is extremely important for a couple different reasons. But I also want to put a plug in for, you know, something Scott said about keeping a timeline going. What I find professionally is to move a curriculum from the planning phases to having the rubber hit the road comes around student assessment. And it's having Windsor educators and Weathersfield educators and Heartland educators and Albert Bridge educators coming together and doing that assessment planning, learning how to do assessment, doing assessments. How are you going to measure this? And once you have a measuring mechanism and teachers learn how to create those measuring mechanisms, then you get it becomes public. And I think that's what Scott really, that's his point, to get it out there into the public, to get it going. You create those assessments so that those learning expectations are being measured. The students are being measured. The students are communicating what's being measured to parents, and the parents are communicating what's being measured to the community. I found way too often in which, and all you educators and administrators out there know how you create a curriculum, and then you plan it, and it goes up onto the shelf and it disappears. It goes up onto the shelf because there is no assessment piece. How are you going to measure it? It doesn't matter how often you create what you're going to do unless you have a way to measure it. And once teachers start to process how it's going to be measured, then they can start thinking about, really, how is it going to be taught? How am I going to achieve this? So, I agree wholeheartedly with David that planning to create the goals, to fund that, but at the same time creating those summer time for teachers to get together.
I agree. Let me see, Rebecca and then Elizabeth.
I'm trying to find a way how to put this. Well, first, it sounds to me like this is a district-wide plan. So we're talking about Albert Bridge, we're talking about Windsor, we're talking about Weathersfield, we're talking about Heartland. Now, I'm not really clear on how this happens, but I suspect that there is a professional development budget that already does exist, where teachers are entitled to professional development throughout the year. That said, if this is the district-wide plan, and I'm not saying there should not be the summer opportunities, but is it possible to take some of the professional development plan that should exist for all teachers throughout the year and use some of that budget to bring them together, at least at the beginning, as this is being rolled out, and then, as Bill mentioned, to start creating that buy-in piece, that piece where they identify how they're going to move forward. What I'm saying is, David, I know that there's a need for additional funds But I'm just wondering if already there are funds that are available that can be used. And so we can look at, yes, there is a need for additional funds, but we already have something that has been put aside to address some of this.
Yeah, no,
I
that's
don't know if that really explains my question.
yeah, no, I understand, and I think you're absolutely right. There are profession, and you'll see them in your budgets. I mean, there are professional development funds that are guaranteed by the master agreement that are in there, and those who help negotiate the contract, you'll know what I'm talking about, right? That's that 6 UVM, the equivalent of 6 UVM credits, and that's the professional development money that's guaranteed to every teacher. The problem with that money is that as we're hiring a younger and younger staff, which quite frankly, I love that they're also working on additional certifications and keeping their license up and moving over columns. So they're using a lot of that for their coursework and their professional development money. And we've tried in the past to secure some of that money to do this work this learning frameworks work and the assessment work that Bill's talking about. And they're very hesitant to let us grab a pot of that money to do that kind of work. Sometimes Angie can be creative and create either a course or offer certification credit, and sometimes we'll hit that pot, but it's not as easy as it sounds. Although we can use some of that, Rebecca. We can sort of blend that. And Angie's also got grant monies. You know, she's got some consolidated federal monies. Not all of our schools are eligible for that. So Angie's pretty good about working her magic with that. But every now and then, including the portrait of a graduate work that we just did, we're looking around and we're saying, oh God, we need that extra $10,000 just to get this work off the ground. And right now we don't have a pot at the SU level or even at the building levels that allows for that kind of development work.
And that just goes to my part two of my question, and that is that with the CARES Act this year, there and I don't know, but there are funds that have become available to school districts, and although some of them are not necessarily related to COVID incurred expenses, but they can be used. So right. Some of these funds you have up until April of 2021 to use them. So I'm just saying that there are also some, as you mentioned, there are
pots of money.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question about the number of days that are reserved for professional development, because I know that SU staff, administrators, everyone meets so many days of the school year for professional development, and could some of those days be allocated to what we're talking about with the strategic plan?
I don't know if Angie wants to answer that. I mean, I certainly could take a quick stab at it and just say that, yeah, we could. The problem is that after you get through some of the parent conference days are part of that, those extra in-service days, and 2 of those days are dedicated to setting up their classrooms. And you probably have about 5 days left to work with, and we do sprinkle some of that throughout the year using those 5 days. The problem is the kind of learning framework and assessment work that Bill is talking about in the plan addresses. It really needs concentrated time, and I also find that during the school year, teachers are so focused on lesson planning, and especially in this COVID atmosphere, that I found we used to call them in the old days, we used to call them summer development institutes or school development institutes, because it was time, in the summer when teachers could concentrate on this type of work, well facilitated by somebody like Angie or somebody else we might have to facilitate that work. But yeah, I think we can use a combination of both, Amy.
Thanks. Elizabeth?
Thank you. I was just going to ask whether I'm thinking that the data person, the data person, whichever you prefer, is sort of like a bill, right? They are sort of like Bill Yates.
Yeah.
And so, is it feasible that that person could be combined with a communications person? That those roles could be kind of woven together?
I guess it would depend on the skill of that person, but I do think the data person could certainly much, and I don't know, Bill, how much of your job is data, but I imagine a lot of it is. But there's, there's student
data. His job is your job data?
Yeah, you do a lot of data.
Yes. That's my point. My point is that I think Bill's whole job is data, and he does it really well. He seems to be really busy with his data job, and that it's not just something, it's not necessarily an add-on to somebody else's job. That's my point.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other thing, Elizabeth, is why so many school districts are hiring someone like me is because the state reporting requirements have gotten so complicated. So that takes up a large portion of my time. But so today I spent all day crunching middle school posted grades to see, what was going wrong with the SIS grade book. And why? Because we shifted to a complete PBLO indicator-based standard system in the middle school. So,
yeah.
Angie, I just wanted to say one thing, and then it's your turn. Not only, I think, having not necessarily an add-on of data to someone else's job, but we as an SU and at the individual school district level, ever since I have been on the board, like quite a few years, we have talked about the need for better communication with our communities. And there will be a jump of activity, and everyone is really happy with the newsletters that go out or just information that's being shared with our communities. And then that person who had that added on to their regular job had more to do with their regular job, and the communication aspect just fell off the whole planet. And then suddenly we have more community being, we never hear from the school. How come there isn't any communication? So I think it would be just so very, very exciting to have a real plan with someone that is their job, and they are helping all 3 of our districts communicate with all of our communities, not just the parents of students, but reaching out to everyone, because all the adults in our community are part of we're taxpayers and we're supporting our schools, and hearing all of the amazing things that are happening at the schools will make us happier when we get our tax bill. And with that, Angie, go for it.
I wanted to reflect a little bit more on what happens with our in-service days. So we have 9 by contract, and David said, we have a prep before the school year and at the end of the school year. And then we have 2 teacher conference days. So that gives us 5 days. And when we open school in a typical year, we have 2 or 3 days just to open school and get everybody on board. And then that leaves us really only 2 days to do training. Last year, and sometimes we do those trainings in October. So I'm entering my 4th year. And so over the course of 3 years, we've typically had a training day in January. For 2 years of the last 3 years, we've had that day be a wellness day. Actually, it was a wellness day 1 January, and then last year we did wellness in March, which is us putting our time and efforts into something that we value for our staff. So you can see that trying to put together curriculum standards, learning expectations, that work isn't going to happen in 5 professional development days. And the other thing is that during those professional development days, we have all staff on board, and not all staff are necessarily involved in the writing. I mean, for certain job roles, it doesn't lend itself to that. So I think more efficiently, I just wanted to say that I agree with having time in the summer to have make a concentrated effort with identified outcomes for work that we want. But then we can plan professional development for how we roll that work out with our staff in the fall, and that would be part of the work that the team would do during the summer.
Thank you, Angie.
Yeah.
And I apologize for sounding like we could just rearrange everything, because I know there are just so many things going on, particularly the wellness. That has been a very a very positive way to spend the professional development time. Let me see. Oh my gosh. So Rebecca,
Rebecca,
well, I do want to just say one thing, and when I went on, and I think I tried to get that out to most of you, but when I attended the webinar on the budget, and it was just really clear that that the state-wide financial outlook is really uncertain, and we were encouraged to really just pay attention to how we move forward. This year we will be able to receive funding for any COVID incurred experiences, but there's no guarantee that it's going to happen next year. And yet, what they're saying is that we may be required to do the same, provide the same sort of services and procedures that we're doing this year, but it's going to be on our dime. And they're just saying, just be aware of what's coming down the road. So as you proceed with your budgets, just keep that in mind.
Thank you for that reminder, Rebecca, because there's a very fine line at the district level, that kind of the local level, as we're building our budgets and we have our hopes and dreams of what we want to implement with that budget. And it comes up against a wall from the state. Often about the time we get our budget created, and it might have a 3% increase, let's just say, and the governor comes out and says, with a directive, more or less, saying that budget should not go up more than 1.3%. And then we have to decide on the local level, okay, what is important here? What are our priorities? And having the strategic plan here gives us a foundation for showing our priorities. Jennifer and then David.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment a little bit on the idea of adding on to positions. So there's the communication person, the data person, which are listed in the same area, and then there's the student wellness and social emotional person. I guess what I just want to caution us is if any one of us on this team could take on more, I think we would. I think these things would already be done and be done well if we possibly could do that. And so thinking of adding it onto a position that's already here is something that I think is almost wishful thinking. And I also think that's probably true of many of our teacher leaders in our school. They are already pretty maxed out. Just want to add that thought.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. David.
Yeah, just quickly, I think that idea of priority is critical too, and that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation, and we're trying to just get a sense of the implications for budget that this plan might present. I mean, we're still in the early stages, but what I would say is from certainly talking to the administrative team, and I know Angie and I have had maybe even deeper conversations about this. If you had to layer this, in other words, what should come first and what would come second, I mean, in order to have somebody communicating and also perhaps analyzing data, you have to have that goal one has to start. And that's that learning frameworks, which includes the assessment work that Bill's talking about. You've got to build that system, and then I think you're communicating about that system and you're analyzing the data around that system. Now, whether they both come simultaneously or whether one comes a little before the other, I don't know. I know that one of our trepidations about, is sort of related to what Rebecca said. This year, I think, and Ed keeps telling me this, and I think this year we're going to be okay because we are going to have access to those CARES monies and the COVID monies. Next year, maybe, not so bright, but next year, remember, starts July 1. So if there's going to be some summer work that's done, it's going to be not in this year's budget. It's going to be in next year's budget. So again, I just want to advocate, going along with what Angie said, that if we wanted to have a little bit of stipend money available this summer to continue that learning framework work, and because we've been talking about the learning framework for a long time, and then designing the assessment tools that go along with that framework. Bill is absolutely right that framework and those assessment tools are critical, but that's going to require some concentrated time for the staff to do that work. I don't think it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, I think if we had, I don't know, 10 to 20,000 in there would be more than enough to get that work started this summer. And I'm not saying we have to make that decision tonight, but I'd like to be able to go back to Ed and tell him what, if there's something we want to add, so that when we come to the budget next Monday night, it's in there. You can see the implications of the bottom line. The nice thing about the SU budget and things being in the SU budget is that we spread that out according to our pupil, and everybody has access to it, and everybody, it's part of all of the work we're doing across the SU. Because when we get first grade teachers together, we don't just get first grade teachers from Weathersfield. We get the entire complement of first grade teachers or pre-K2 teachers across the SU. And that's where that work gets intensive, and it has to be very concentrated. And we've got good systems to do it. We just haven't had the money to pay for it or the plan to support it. Now we do.
Just a teeny tiny aside, what you were talking, David, about all of the first grade teachers, that it's not just in one school. When I first got on the school board, it was difficult to get first grade teachers within a school talking to each other. So it's taken a while, but we've come a long way, that our teachers and overall staff are working together for all of our students. Scott.
Thank you, Amy. I think this is a really good thread we're on, and my memory is of looking at our first look at the strategic plan and the bridge. I think the board heard that there was a real urgency of sorts identified by that leader, that process leader in the communications department. And that's the way I remember it. I'm not sure where I heard that, but I just wanted to, I think there might be there's signals here that are kind of flying across the screen. And I think a few administrators from buildings have said some important points about, if this work could be accomplished, it would be. And I believe that also. I want to put my 2 cents in there that's what public school leaders do. And the other thing, and Rebecca makes a very good point. I really appreciate that reminder, Rebecca, about the state's financial situation. And one good thing about the SU spending is that maybe we could find some efficiencies in our districts if we spent on a communications leader position at the SU. I mean, there's time being spent in our districts on such stuff. I don't know what that might mean, but you might find efficiencies in our districts if that was being done centrally. I've noticed, just one thing I noticed about my own interactions with social media is I see that some of our districts move their news feeds right to Twitter, for instance, and pretty quickly, and others don't. And it would be, kind of interesting to see that be more unified.
And that would be easy to make that happen. I mean, it should be happening everywhere now, but maybe there are a few that don't do that. That's a good point, Scott.
I'll let you go in just a moment, Elizabeth, but to Scott's point, with having a news feed go up on Facebook or Twitter or something, a newsletter, that is one more step for someone to do, which sometimes a person who doesn't have just that on their job, that's that one more thing that can push them over the edge. So it would be good to have someone who is dedicated to help make sure that happens for all of the schools, instead of someone saying, oh, geez, I forgot to put that on Twitter, or, oh, I forgot. Yeah, just so many things that everyone is doing. Elizabeth.
As the representative elect for 3/4 of our towns, I now have access to a lot more information about things like the state budget. And we're supposed to get a legislative update on where the education budget stands. I think it's next Wednesday. So I'd be glad to share that with you when I get it, if you want me to. But I don't want to share it with you if you have no interest in it, because it's too much to remember.
That's the whole reason we supported you, Elizabeth. We want an inside track. You are our lobbyist in my city.
In fact, I am. And
good.
Likewise, so if you have things, and I certainly don't want to sway the conversation at all. Just putting a plug in. If you have things that you want me to bring to the State House, please just email me separately, or we can talk about it in another discussion, but speak up, because that's what I'm here for.
That's great. It'll be a great asset. I know Hartford has had the luxury of having a legislator on their board, and the superintendent tells me that's very advantageous because sometimes you can get out ahead of certain issues. So that'll be great.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. And Rebecca, do you have your hand up? Or
That might have been an old hand.
I think I'm just having a problem with bringing my hand down, but I did have something to say, so I'll take advantage of the moment. Getting back to Jennifer's comment on I guess, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but the mental health and social emotional leader, is that what you were talking about before, Jennifer?
That's one of them that's in the plan to add at some point.
That's cool.
Yeah. Was that mentioned about, getting someone in sooner than later?
That's under the wellness part, I think.
I guess if you want to ask me my opinion, my thinking is that we've got a lot moving forward in that direction, that if I were to prioritize, I think where we fall short first is communication and data. And I think we've got enough people now on board with social emotional that we can swing it for a little while longer.
Thank you.
So I don't think we need a vote tonight, but if somebody could summarize where they think we are and what you would like, because Ed and I will be working over the next, we certainly, will not be working the whole week because of Thanksgiving, but we want to bring a reasonably, finalized draft of the budget the SU budget to everybody next Monday night.
I have an idea. Amy?
yes.
Okay. Angie, is there any way that you can sort of put together what a summer group to work on the goals for this strategic plan might look like and what it might cost? My estimate would be, of course, what David threw out. I mean, $20,000 or $25,000, $30,000 to put together a team to start this summer, and then communicate that to Ed, so he can put that money in, and so it's written out what it's for. I think you're the perfect person to sort of streamline that. I mean, spearhead that. That effort.
Yes, I totally think I could do something like that. Tomorrow's Tuesday, and the meeting is Monday. Not by Monday, the 30th, with Thanksgiving break. So I'd be happy to work on something for the next time or to share in between the time. We do have that $125 for non-curriculum work a day, right, David?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
That's the agreement on the master agreement, which does save us money. So my thinking about it, because David did ask me this question a couple weeks ago. Sorry, I got to put my fat hat in. She bugs me. I thought, well, if we had a $5,000 budget, that's what we would spend. Because if we had a $10,000 budget, that's what we would plan for. Because the work is going to expand. And it's what the board will tolerate, what we think the voters will tolerate. So we're going to design the work, and it's going to continue. So we get the work done based on what our budget is for that, to do that work.
Yeah. So I think I hear exactly what you say. So whatever we spend, we will use. So I think a $20,000, when you look at, it's going to be split between 3 separate groups, and you look at the budget as a whole, that really is quite a small drop in the bucket. that will push forward something that we've been working towards for a decade, Amy? Yeah.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
And it's also another thing to look at is that 20,000 is going to be allotted through assessment. So it won't be taking a $20,000 chunk out of any one district's budget. And it will also enhance the work, if we're talking communication, it will enhance all of the work that our schools are doing.
Yeah. I think when Angie and I ran the numbers using that $125 a day, which is about $25 an hour, which is a pretty good professional rate for a summer rate. It's much better than most of the per diem work that they would do at the per diem rate. But I think if we were in that $15,000 to $20,000 range, we would be fine. I'll be able to talk to Ed and see. I think he might have put a little bit in anticipation of this anyway, but I can work with him on that piece. And I think, given the work that Angie and I have done prior to this, I think we can come up with a number. I think I'd really also like to just get a sense of where we are in terms of data and communication. I mean, we could either start that at the stipend rate or a part-time position, or I mean, is this the year to, I guess, you always think about this in this COVID environment. I mean, is this the year to be introducing a new position? It's really, I think we could defend it at the strategic planning level, but you've got to remember, you still have a lot of people out of work. You still have a lot of people whose unemployment benefits run out December 31st. You're still going to be selling tough budgets. I mean, one of the things about the SU budget is it does divide three ways among our districts, and technically it doesn't have to go to public vote. You vote on the SU budget, but then you've got to take those assessments and defend that at your local district levels when you're defending your budgets. So I mean, we don't have to spend a lot more time, but if we had just a little direction before we closed up tonight, that would be helpful.
Rebecca, did you still have?
She's taking her hand down.
Bill, your hand is raised.
So David, let me put in my 2 cents about communication and data. I think what needs to happen is, before you talk about adding a position, you have to analyze with the data piece who does what already.
I agree.
Then decide what a new data person would do, or what would a new communication person do. Because it's pretty unlikely you're going to find someone with the skill set to do both well. And I know I work with the Windsor data people because we have to cross paths with state reporting 3 or 4 times a year, and for state reporting and pulling stuff out of Power School, I mean, your existing crew is pretty good for just the pulling the data. Analyzing it and deciding. I think it's important to find someone who can communicate it, but that person also has to be able to find something to communicate. I mean, that's where the data piece comes in. You just can't make stuff up. And when you have questions, and when people at Hartford has questions, that I'm the one that answers it. I have to, and then I have to dig down and streamline it and pull stuff out and analyze it. I'm not a particularly good communicator, though. So I communicate with the principals, and I communicate with individual teachers. So I think that's we need to figure out, and the administration has to figure out what they want in this position before you start hiring.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And you're right. We do have people now that do process the data. I know, Ryan Dow is very good at that. He handles all the state reporting in consultation with Larry. But again, this position's a little more around, the analysis of that data once it comes together. So yeah, I think we need a little more conversation about this. I hesitate to, until we've done that work, I hesitate to put a chunk of money in there to hire somebody unless we know exactly what we need them to do. I agree with you, Bill.
Yeah. Little background story. When I got hired, the other person who applied for the job, Rena Burnett, was the person who was doing a lot of the data stuff at Hartford already. And she wasn't thrilled at me getting the job and her not. But after working with her for a couple years, she basically said to me, Bill, I'm so glad you're here because I don't have that education background that you do. Yeah. And the stuff that you're doing, there's no way I could do.
Right.
So it's having somebody who can analyze the data with an education background so that they can understand it and then apply it. So yeah,
I agree.
Elizabeth put into the chat about a solution like get a Tuck student. On the surface, that could be good. It would be really good experience for the Tuck student, but that Tuck student is going to leave. And then we would possibly replace with another Tuck student and not necessarily have as good of an experience. So Elizabeth, you have your hand raised.
What I was going to say was that if we had a Tuck student help, because there are lots of, I know, students who study marketing and communications, which I ironically have a hard time saying. If we got a Tuck student to come in, they might be able to come in and do the first huge chunk that we need of true marketing of all of our districts and of our whole supervisory union. Because I think when we think about that job, we think about everything, from where we are right now in a constant lift mode. But I suspect that if we got somebody to do a phase for us, we might be able to hand it off to somebody else to do a second phase, which would, maybe be less of a full-time job.
Yeah, that's true too. And not only could they do that first phase, but they could look at our whole system and help us develop that plan so that we have a
Exactly.
Realistic job description.
Yep.
When we go to hire the regular person. But in the meantime, we do need to have someone assist us with sending out the communications with our community.
I agree, but I think that like my husband, when he was at Michigan, these are exactly the kind of projects that they look for at a graduate, an MBA program, to like something that helps the community, something that helps along the community, that the salary would actually be something of a donation to the local area. And I don't know, it seems like it might be, wouldn't be easy, but I think it's a possibility and definitely doable.
Well, you could put out a request for proposal. Basically, here's what we want to analyze, and here's the plan, and yeah, that's a possibility. Just to kind of, that could be a step one, is just to kind of get it.
Like one of the things that media people or marketing and communications people, I don't know why I have such a hard time saying that, but one of the things they do is come out with a media plan, and then it like the strategic plan has, blocks of time. We're going to get you up to this level over the first year and a half or 2 years. And then, then after that it's maintenance, or, it takes on different projects. But if we had somebody who could come in and write that plan or get us up to a level, then I think it could be handed off to somebody else. It should be handoffable.
Yeah. The other caution.
And paid internships are significantly less budget intensive than hiring a full-time person.
Yeah.
There are also unpaid internships.
The other caution that I would have, and I certainly feel less of this with it coming from the board, but I remember when I was in Hartford, Bill, this was before your time, but the superintendent at that time, who's no longer the superintendent, I think partly because of this, but he hired I forget if it was half-time or full-time central office, communications, director of communications or something like that. And took some pretty significant heat for, sort of in the world of public education where you're scraping for resources and everything's based on property tax. I mean, there's also that caveat that, you're trying to hire somebody to sell a bill of goods, or can you, and I know that's not what we're talking about here, but I just want to caution us that, new positions, especially at the central office level, sometimes are looked at pretty critically. And I think that taxpayers will look at that pretty critically. I think doing some sort of an analysis of it is a whole different story. I think we need to be careful about hiring a new central office position that might be dedicated even half-time to some of this work. I mean, for example, one of the things Larry and I have been talking about is he's got 4 people under him right now and himself. And we've been talking about whether or not one of those positions, which is now a technician, could be phased out and something else could happen. So it might be that the money's already in the budget. It's a matter of reorganizing and reprioritizing those positions a little bit, because like Bill said, some of that's already happening really well in the data management part of that with Larry's crew, but they don't have that educational background. And I'm just kind of telling you, there's a lot of different options here. I wouldn't want to make any significant decisions at 8:20 tonight, but I think the ideas are free flowing, and we can put something together maybe that at least funds a portion of that analysis work.
Are there any other comments? I think, let me see, so I think the main direction that our discussion has taken this evening is the need to look at professional development money for summer. Yeah. And to also perhaps start that conversation of seeing if if the Tuck School would be interested, or
someone. Yep.
Yeah, or someone in helping us create a communication plan. Does that cover what we're sending David off to discuss with Ed in terms of the budget proposal that we will hear on Monday? Hopefully we will get those numbers sooner than Monday so we can look at them and we can ask real questions as opposed to scrambling to look at those numbers at the same time. Yeah,
I think we're almost there. I talked to Ed the other day. I mean, part of it is I as Angie pointed out, it's a holiday week, so, you know, we've got to work around that. But I think Ed can have something out by the week, you know, by Monday, or, I mean, by Friday or Saturday, so you'll have some time to look at it before Monday.
And Amy, I have a friend who works at Tuck, and I can at least drop him a line and just send a query about whether that is a pie in the sky idea or whether it's actually reasonable.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, just make sure that it's how would we go about this kind of thing instead of this is what we want to do.
I wouldn't even go there. I would just ask whether such a proposal might be is it harebrained or not.
Yeah, okay.
Either yes or no, and then we can go from there.
Okay, yeah. Sounds good.
We also have an adopted strategic plan, so that's good work tonight.
Yeah. Are there any other comments? It is getting kind of, well, it's 8:22, and our meeting was warned for 8:30, but wouldn't it be grand to get out 8 minutes early?
That wouldn't hurt. I didn't know. I see we've got 3. Anne Marie, are you still on? Did we lose Anne Marie? No, I see her. I think I see her. Yeah, there she is. Okay, she's there. I just wondered if I could just very quickly, when we do break up, keep the 3 Weathersfield board members on just for a second. It won't take long at all. Just I want to just give you a quick update.
Okay, so without hearing any further discussion on strategic plan, budget, etc., I will take a motion to adjourn, and I want to thank everyone for the really good conversation that we had tonight.
So moved.
I can move that.
Okay.
Second.
Great. All those in favor? Yay.
All right.
Thank you so much.
That's great.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Kristen and Anne Marie and Mark could stick around. Thanks.
Yep, I'm here.
Happy
David?
Thanksgiving, everybody.
David, just a reminder to
Stop the
stop
recording.
the meeting.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point.
Good night, everyone. Have a happy
Good night, Amy.
Thanksgiving.